In the early 1940s, the greatest threat to Britain's survival didn't come from a massive fleet of surface battleships. The danger was invisible, striking from deep underwater to strangle the island's supply lines. The weapon of choice was the Type VII U-boat. Unlike the smaller coastal Type II submarines that preceded it, the Type VII was engineered to be a medium-range hunter, built specifically to stalk the deep, open ocean. It was remarkably agile on the surface, where it spent most of its time. Commanders heavily utilized its 88mm deck gun to finish off wounded merchant vessels, saving their highly valuable torpedoes for larger, more dangerous targets. A schematic of the initial Type VIIa reveals a vulnerability. The stern torpedo tube sat exposed above the waterline, making rough sea reloads impossible. Engineers iterated on later models, moving the tube inside the pressure hole and adding exterior fuel tanks to increase operational range. Through rapid, constant refinement, the Kriegsmarine turned a flawed prototype into a highly lethal delivery system, perfectly tailored to execute a terrifying new naval doctrine. That doctrine was Rudal Tactic, the Wolfpack. The Type VII was never intended to hunt alone. Instead, it operated as part of a coordinated swarm, guided to its targets by decrypted enemy radio intercepts from German intelligence, known as WWII. These intelligence reports pointed the dispersed U-boats directly toward the massive, sprawling Allied supply convoys inching their way across the Atlantic. When the first U-boat spotted a convoy, it didn't attack immediately. Acting as a shadower, it maintained a safe distance and radioed headquarters to summon the rest of the pack. Once multiple submarines converged, they waited for nightfall to launch a coordinated surface assault. Operating more like agile torpedo boats than traditional submerged submarines, they slipped right through the gaps in the convoy's defensive screens. By temporarily concentrating their forces in one specific location, a numerically inferior group of U-boats could completely overwhelm the escorts of a heavily defended convoy. During the invasion of Norway in 1940, U-boat commanders executed these tactics perfectly. They penetrated the defensive screens, lined up their targets, fired, and nothing happened. Torpedoes hit the steel hulls and harmlessly bounced off, or simply sank into the abyss. The delivery system performed exactly as designed, but the payloads, the G7A and G7E torpedoes, were failing the crews. The primary culprit was a complex magnetic exploder that proved unreliable under combat conditions. This diagram illustrates the first fatal flaw. The magnetic pistol was meant to detect a ship's steel hull and detonate directly under the keel. But in northern latitudes, Earth's magnetic variations and iron-rich fjords warped the sensors, triggering premature explosions or complete duds. Even worse, the torpedoes consistently ran far too deep. By passing 10 feet below the keel, they completely bypassed the magnetic trigger zone. The root cause of this depth issue was bizarre. Routine battery ventilation inside the U-boat temporarily altered the submarine's internal air pressure. That air leaked past faulty seals into the torpedo's delicate downland chamber, corrupting the depth-keeping mechanism before it even left the tube. These cascading mechanical failures were the direct result of institutional hubris, a stubborn refusal by engineers to conduct realistic, destructive peacetime testing in varied combat conditions. Germany wasn't the only nation to make this mistake. At the outbreak of the Pacific War, the United States Navy committed the exact same testing error. The American equivalent hardware was the Mark 14 torpedo, equipped with the highly secret Mark 6 magnetic exploder. And just like the German weapons, it suffered from identical depth-keeping flaws and magnetic detonation failures. When American submarine commanders reported the duds, the U.S. Bureau of Ordnance stubbornly blamed the captains for poor aim, refusing to acknowledge that their untested weapons were the actual problem. Matter of fact, in both navies, isolated laboratory testing and bureaucratic arrogance paralyzed their offensive capabilities when the shooting actually started. Once the Kriegsmarine finally abandoned the faulty magnetic exploders and recalibrated their depth settings, the Type VII finally achieved its lethal potential. But the Allies were adapting too. They deployed a SDIC, an early form of active sonar, utilized by escort destroyers to ping and hunt submerged U-boats. To counter a SDC, Type VII commanders relied on their primary tactical strength, attacking on the surface at night. Because a SDC's acoustic beams only faced forward and only worked underwater, a surfaced U-boat completely bypassed the technology. Looking at a cross-section of the ocean, we can see how crews evaded detection when forced to dive. They would submerge beneath a thermocline, a horizontal layer of water with a drastically different temperature. This layer scattered and bounced the active sonar pings back to the surface, cloaking the submarine lurking safely beneath it. U-boat survival relied entirely on weaponizing the ocean's physics to exploit the specific technical limitations of the Allied hunting equipment. In just one 6-month window in 1942, Karl Dönitz's U-boat crew sank nearly 1.5 million tons of Allied shipping. It was a staggering rate of destruction that nearly outpaced the Allies' ability to build new merchant vessels, putting the entire British supply chain at risk. The U-boat crisis demonstrates that even a highly advanced vehicle is only as effective as its payload. Without rigorous testing, a brilliant tactical doctrine can fail the moment it meets the need.